So I tried to reply to your original comment, but for some reason it didn't let me. I don't understand how TikTok works, but I really wanted to talk about that question because it was such a great question. So you had said that you were having some trouble being patient in your homeschool and you were trying really hard not to be controlling. And did I have any advice for that? And boy, do I. This is something that I think every single homeschool parent struggles with, and I don't think it's talked about enough. The simple fact is, it can be really, really frustrating to homeschool, and it can be really, really hard to be patient all the time. It is absolutely normal to have bad days, to have a day where you're impatient, or even to have a bad week. We all have those, we all go through that. But if you're having trouble regularly, if this is a constant pattern of you being frustrated or finding that you're having a hard time being patient or whatever it is, then there are a lot of things that we can do about that. Now, if you and I were working together one-on-one, we would be keeping a list. We would be tracking what happened in these moments where you feel really impatient or you feel like you really need to take that control. And we would be looking at what was happening before, what was happening in your life, what was happening after. We would be thinking about the thoughts that you have and what your expectations are. We'd be tracking that all. We'd be talking about it. And we'd be getting to the root cause of what was causing you to feel that way. But since I don't have much context, I will just talk about what I find normally are the causes of a homeschool parent feeling really controlling or feeling really impatient. I think first and foremost, it is often because they have an overloaded cognitive load. The topic of cognitive load has been all over the interwebs, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time defining it, but basically it's just the amount of thoughts and planning and executive tasks you have to carry in your brain. And for a homeschooling parent, there's more than just your average parent because you have all of the tasks of homeschooling that you have to think about all the time. Having an extremely heavy cognitive load is one of the most common reasons why homeschooling parents feel very controlling and they feel very impatient with their kids because they just have so much on their mind. They don't have the mental space to examine their thoughts, to examine what's been happening, and to be proactive. To reduce our cognitive load, we have to make lifestyle changes, and that is a big ask when we're talking about people who might have a lot of things that they're managing and are just barely hanging on. That doesn't necessarily describe every homeschool parent, but it does describe a lot of us. A lot of us are taking care of our home, taking care of our children, working, providing for the family, and homeschooling. It's a lot. So I encourage you to look at your life and figure out areas that you can hand some things off or let some things go. And I say it so flippantly, but I know that's really, really tough to do. The second reason why I see homeschooling parents get very controlling or impatient or frustrated with their kids all the time is because they have a disconnect between their expectations and reality. Let's face it, we put a ton of work into homeschooling our kids and making sure they have an excellent education. We plan the lessons, we plan activities, we try to make them fun, we try to make them engaging. We try to watch our children and figure out what interests them and what makes them excited and then plan lessons around it so they'll be engaged and they'll be excited. And then sometimes, a lot of times, they're not. There's nothing more frustrating than working and working and working to plan something great for your kids and have them be absolutely disinterested and even uncooperative. But we have to view it through a developmentally appropriate lens and realize that it is absolutely appropriate for our kids to not want to do schoolwork, school, projects. It's absolutely developmentally appropriate that our kids are not necessarily always thinking about our feelings and how much work we put into it, and that they are actually just kind of self-centered little beings, because that's pretty much what kids are. Kids have this amazing duality in that sometimes they are other-centered, they're empathetic, they're aware of other people's feelings, and they care a lot about it, and then the next second they only care about themselves. That inconsistency is absolutely developmentally appropriate through children's younger ages all the way up through their teen years. It has a lot to do with brain development, it has a lot to do with experience, and of course we don't want to raise these entitled little tyrants. But we also have to recognize that sometimes our children will appear entitled. And it's up to us to set appropriate boundaries with their behavior, but to not lose our cool. And that has to do with your expectations. Grounding yourself in reality before you even go into the homeschool space and trying to work with your kids. Taking a deep breath, reminding yourself that this may not go the way that you had imagined it. And then having a plan for if your children behave inappropriately. So once you've set developmentally appropriate expectations, what are you going to do if your kids behave inappropriately? And you don't even have to tell them what you're going to do. You just have to have a plan. We don't need to threaten them with a plan. If you don't do this, I'm going to send you to your room. But we need to know. We need to have a plan that we're comfortable with, that we've set out ahead of time, that we've done the if then I do this planning ahead of time, so that we aren't feeling that stress and that impotent frustration when our children misbehave, because they will, they're kids. We need to have an idea of what we're going to do. You know, if little Sally sits down and is giving you lip after she's asked you for help on a math problem, how are you going to handle that? What consequence will there be for her? I give that example because it's a real life example from my daughter. She was having trouble with her math. She asked me for help. I sat down to help her, and oh man, was she giving me lip? Was she being grumpy? It made me so mad. But this wasn't our first rodeo, so I knew exactly what I was going to do. I sat her down and I said, here are your options. You can get up, get a drink, go to the bathroom, take a walk around the house, whatever you need to do for 5 minutes to calm down. Or you can sit here and continue to be frustrated trying to figure out the problem on your own. Or I can help you, but you're going to be respectful. I let her know in no uncertain terms that she wasn't going to sit there and abuse me because she was frustrated. She needed to use the tools that I'd already taught her to manage her frustration so she didn't take it out on me. And then I had to take my own advice and use my own tools because I was pretty frustrated. The funny thing is, she decided to sit there and be frustrated for another 30 minutes, but that was okay. That was a lesson she needed to learn. And that was great practice for me to regulate myself and remind myself that it was totally appropriate for her to make that choice. We eventually used the skills that we had been working on to help her deal with her frustration, and I was able to help her and we were able to move through it. So those are the 3 most common things that parents can do so that they are more patient when they are working with their kids. Do whatever you can to reduce your cognitive load so you have some space to regulate yourself. Check that your expectations are developmentally appropriate. And then have a plan for how you're going to react when your children are acting inappropriately, so you're not mired in the confusion and that impotent frustration in the moment when your rational brain is offline and your irrational brain is like, you should yell at them. And of course, if it's a problem that you can't get a handle on and it's something you're really concerned about, you can always schedule an appointment. We can go through this one-on-one. There are a lot of tools and strategies you can use to be a more patient homeschooler. But remember, patience is a learned skill set. Just like our kids can learn to read and write and do math, we can learn to be more patient people. When we say things like, I'm just not a patient person, we tell our own brain that this is not something we can learn, but it absolutely is. Cut yourself some slack. Homeschooling can be very, very frustrating sometimes, and it's okay if every once in a while you lose your cool, as long as you make the repair afterwards. So I hope that helped, and if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments.